He's just a Terran, she screamed, right before he shattered her sovereign's elite guard. A colossal starship bridge, aglow with shifting emerald and gold displays, hovered above a swirling projection of the Andara Nebula. Light rippled along the ceiling like the flicker of distant suns, bathing alien officers in a spectral glow. At the heart of the bridge, Sovereign Lysara reclined on her throne of dark crystal, draped in a gown the color of midnight leaves. Her golden eyes, sharp and unblinking, reflected more than mere data. Within them danced the collapse of the last Terran outpost in the Helion sector. Yet, as the screens filled with the carnage of her armada's victory, Lysara's gaze fixed elsewhere, on a lone fighter weaving madly through the firestorm. The battered vessel danced between annihilating beams with reckless brilliance, evading destruction with maneuvers bordering on suicidal. Below, Commandant Varel's face, precision sculpted and cold, remained impassive. The Armada awaits your order to commence eradication. However, Sovereign, the pilot of that vessel intrigues you? Lysara's lips curved, the hint of amusement slicing through her composure. Bring him to me, alive. I wish to see the spirit that defies extinction. Without hesitation, Viril gestured, a silent command. From the belly of the dreadnought, an emerald tractor beam lanced out, catching the Terran fighter in its grasp. The battered ship twisted, engines shrieking in protest, but resistance was futile. Across the starfield, the remnants of the Terran fleet vanished, one by one, in blazing silence, until only the captured vessel remained. Hours slipped by, marked by the slow, methodical hum of the Sovereign's war machine. In a chamber of glass and shadow, the fighter's hatch hissed open. Marcus emerged, a Terran pilot, human, his flight suit torn, one cheek streaked with blood. He was taller than the guards that flanked him, but exhaustion weighed on his shoulders. Yet his eyes, a stormy blue, held steady and unbroken. He was marched before Lysara's throne, the bridge now emptied of all but Virel and a pair of silent sentinels. Lysara regarded Marcus as a collector might regard a rare, defiant animal, with a predator's patience, more interested in the spirit than the scars. She descended from her throne, boots clicking softly against the obsidian floor. Her gaze swept over Marcus, taking in the set of his jaw, the refusal to kneel. "You will serve as a reminder that even the smallest spark can flicker in the void," she declared, her voice a cool blade. Marcus met her stare, silent, chin lifted. He said nothing, but the words in his eyes rang clear. "I am not yours." Lysara felt a flicker within her, a pulse of curiosity, faint but real. It had been centuries since anything breached the armor of her certainty. She turned away, signaling the guards. "Transfer him to the Verdancy." The command echoed through the ship. Marcus was led away, and Lysara watched him until the last glimpse of his silhouette disappeared behind the doors. The Verdancy was no ordinary cell. It sprawled beneath an artificial dome, a surreal echo of lost worlds, verdant grasses, alien trees swaying with bioluminescent fruit, a crystalline stream winding through the emerald undergrowth. The air shimmered with the sense of wild earth and unfamiliar blossoms, beauty entwined with captivity. Marcus woke on the soft ground, disoriented. He ran his hands through grass both familiar and subtly wrong, listened to the hum of distant engines beneath the birdsong. He pressed at the dome's seamless edge, testing the invisible barriers. He mapped the land, charted every stream, tested the water, tasted the fruit, and found everything nourishing yet strange. Days slipped by. Every action was observed, he knew. There were no obvious cameras, but he felt the weight of unseen eyes. Each morning, Lysara came. Always alone, dressed not for war, but in flowing robes that shimmered with shifting patterns, she watched as he swam the stream or sat with his back to a tree, As he traced constellations in the sky he knew were illusions. Their first conversation was sparse, a ritual of suspicion. Lisara circled him, questioning with soft, measured words. "You adapt quickly," she noted, head tilted. "Do all Terrans change shape to fit their cages?" Marcus shrugged, refusing to look at her. "You make it sound like a virtue." "All cages are honest, if you look closely enough," she replied, eyes gleaming. He glanced up at that, wary. "Honest about what?" "About the limits they impose, and what they reveal of those within," she said, voice softer than starlight. Their conversations became a duel. She pressed him about his home, his reasons for fighting. Marcus replied with guarded truths, never volunteering more than necessary. Sometimes they simply watched each other across the stream, a silence charged with the knowledge that this was not freedom, and yet not quite subjugation. One evening, the dome's false sky was streaked with gold. Lysara stepped close, her vibrant green skin catching the dying light, crimson hair tumbling in loose waves over pointed ears. Her temples, dark-marked, shifted with some emotion Marcus could not name. She leaned in, her voice velvet and dangerous. A black-tipped finger traced his jaw, light as a falling leaf. "Every will can bend, given time," she murmured. Marcus stared at her, unflinching. "You're welcome to try." A current passed between them, defiance met by fascination, and for an instant, the cage seemed to shimmer with possibility. Lysara's curiosity became scientific. The soft green wilderness of the verdancy faded behind Marcus as armored guards led him through a labyrinth of silver corridors. The walls pulsed with faint light, and his bare feet chilled against the smooth, sterile floors. He'd left behind the illusion of freedom. Now, he stepped into the realm of experiment. The chamber was vast, clinical, stripped of comfort. Its domed ceiling shimmered with cold illumination. Transparent panels revealed banks of instruments, robotic arms poised like the fingers of ancient statues. Lysara stood at the center, clad in form-fitting ivory, the color of bone, her hair twisted into a crimson crown. She watched Marcus's entrance with a gleam that was equal parts hunger and hypothesis. He squared his shoulders, refusing to let her see his unease. Lysara gestured to a platform. "Lie down," she said, voice dispassionate. "We will begin." Marcus hesitated, but curiosity and pride drove him forward. He stretched out on the surface, hands at his sides. Restraints curled around his wrists and ankles, gentle, almost loving, but unbreakable. Lysara activated the first sequence. The chamber's gravity surged. Marcus's chest compressed as if invisible weights pressed him into the table. His heart thudded painfully against his ribs. He focused on his breath, refusing to gasp. His vision narrowed, spots dancing at the edges. Lysara circled, eyes fixed on the readings. "Your bones are denser than expected," she murmured, almost to herself. "Adaptation to high-stress environments. Fascinating." She dialed the pressure higher. Marcus's body screamed in protest. Sweat prickled at his brow. He bit his lip, tasting copper. When the agony crested, he locked eyes with her, saw not cruelty, but a feverish fascination. She watched not to see him break, but to see how he endured. The gravity relented. Marcus sagged, every muscle trembling. He barely had time to recover before the temperature plummeted. Frost formed along the edge of the platform. His breath crystallized in the air. His teeth chattered, but he gritted them together, focusing on survival. Lysara bent close, a scanner dancing along his skin. Peripheral vasoconstriction, core temperature stabilizing. "You adapt even now," she noted, voice tinged with wonder. A wave of heat followed, searing. Marcus felt his skin flush, sweat beading and then evaporating in the oppressive warmth. He forced himself not to cry out, determined to meet her gaze when it was done. For hours, or perhaps minutes, time lost meaning. She subjected him to trials that should have shattered him. Toxins introduced to his bloodstream, then purged. Pulses of light that threatened to blind. Each time, his body found a way to compensate, to endure, to survive. Lysara's expression shifted from cool detachment to an almost desperate curiosity, as if his endurance was an answer she needed but could not name. After the final ordeal, she deactivated the restraints. Marcus slumped, chest heaving, skin mottled with heat and cold. Lysara approached, hands ungloved now, her face illuminated with something that was not quite triumph. She placed her hand on his chest, fingers splayed over his heart, feeling the steady thud beneath battered flesh. "Perhaps you have no breaking point at all," she said quietly, almost vulnerable. Their eyes met. In that fragile silence, the boundaries between sovereign and subject blurred. The air thickened, charged with a tension that was more than physical exhaustion. Her hand lingered, and Marcus found his defiance colored by something new, curiosity, even admiration. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his skin. "Or perhaps you simply redefine endurance." For a moment, time held its breath. The clinical light softened, as if in deference to the possibility blooming in the space between them, raw and unspoken. Neither moved away. Beyond the chamber, the rumors began. The starship's endless corridors thrummed with whispers. Crew members, loyal and ambitious, exchanged furtive glances in the mess halls and maintenance bays. Some said the Sovereign had gone mad, others that she was hunting for a secret weapon among the Terrans. The truth, wilder still, filtered through the ranks. Sovereign Lysara was obsessed. The human survived every torment. He fascinated her. Some called it science, others called it something far more dangerous. In the crystalline garden that sprawled in the Sovereign's private quarters, where vines glowed in the half-light and rare blossoms perfumed the air, Captain Sarek waited. He stood stiffly, dark uniform immaculate, fingers laced behind his back. His eyes, hard as obsidian, watched Lysara as she paced between luminous petals. He spoke without preamble. "Sovereign, this human is a threat. His presence endangers the throne." Lysara halted, the silken hem of her robe brushing the mossy ground. She turned, gaze icy, regal. "Your concern is noted. You are dismissed." Sarek's jaw tightened, but he bowed with practiced grace and retreated. As he passed through the archway, his eyes burned with calculation. Outside the garden, Sarek found his most trusted lieutenants, sharp-eyed, loyal to him before any crown. Words passed between them in urgent whispers. The Sovereign's judgment was clouded. The Terran must be eliminated. If Lysara would not act, they would. In the silence that followed, Lysara lingered in her garden, her mind replaying the moment her hand rested on Marcus's heart, the pulse she could not forget. A storm of questions swirled behind her golden eyes, but for now, she let the memory linger. Unseen, Sarek's conspiracy began to take shape, and the fate of them all hung poised on a razor's edge. Disguised as a security check, Sarek and his loyalists stormed the Verdancy. The warning klaxon barely had time to echo through the artificial valley before armored boots pounded across the glistening grass. Sunlight, simulated, warm, and peaceful, poured down over the chaos of intrusion. Marcus, stripped to bare feet and simple tunic, looked up from the riverbank where he knelt, hands still wet from the crystalline stream. The glass dome's entrance hissed open. Sarek strode forward, black uniform immaculate, face carved from contempt and conviction. Around him, 4 loyal guards fanned out, plasma rifles raised. They moved with brutal certainty, sweeping aside the illusion of paradise with military precision. From a distant control chamber, Lysara watched. Her golden eyes narrowed at the flickering surveillance feeds. The signals screamed of emergency, but she saw the intent. Sarek's every movement radiated malice. He had not come for an inspection. He had come for an execution. Sarek's voice slashed the air. "He's just a Terran!" Marcus's pulse hammered as the guards closed in. Instinct and memory collided. The drills on Titan, the desperate skirmishes above lost outposts, the defiant refusal to kneel. In that crucible of threat, something inside him broke free. The adaptations Lysara's tests had coaxed forth, the limits she'd pressed until they splintered, now burst into living force. One guard lunged. Marcus twisted aside, impossibly fast. The rifle crackled, beam sizzling inches from his shoulder. He caught the attacker's arm, pivoted, and the guard crashed to the ground with a sickening thud. The second came in from behind, baton swinging, a blur of motion. Marcus ducked, seized the man's wrist, and drove his elbow into the joint. The guard howled and fell. Sarek shouted orders, voice rising above the scuffle. The third and fourth loyalists advanced together, rifles raised. Marcus darted forward, his body moving with an efficiency that felt both alien and deeply his own. He swept the legs from one, dodged a wild shot, and slammed the other into the trunk of a glowing tree. Bark splintered, leaves shuddered. Within seconds, the four loyalists lay scattered across the grass, groaning, unconscious, or utterly still. Only Sarek remained, breath ragged, eyes wide with disbelief. He leveled his sidearm at Marcus, hand trembling. "You're an abomination," Sarek spat. "You should never have been allowed to—" He didn't finish. Marcus stepped in, impossibly swift, and knocked the weapon aside. Sarek struck at him, desperate and wild, but Marcus's reflexes were unearthly. He seized Sarek by the collar, and with a force that nearly lifted the captain from the ground, flung him to the earth. Sarek landed hard, the air punched from his lungs, hatred shattered by pain. For a moment, silence returned. Only the simulated birdsong and the shallow rush of water filled the void. Marcus stood over Sarek's broken form, chest heaving, body trembling with the last shreds of adrenaline and something stranger, an awareness that he had crossed a threshold, that something fundamental within him had changed. From the distant surveillance room, Lysara watched, transfixed. The impossible had unfolded before her, a Terran, subjected to the extremes of her science, now moving with a power that defied even her most optimistic projections. He was not a specimen or a memory of resistance. He was the future, unknown, uncontrollable. She didn't hesitate. With a whispered command, she overrode the security lockdown and sprinted from the chamber. The corridors blurred around her as she raced to the Verdancy, guards and attendants scattering in her wake. The doors parted for her, and Lysara entered the dome. She found Marcus in the center of the clearing, standing amid the fallen, the sun painting his skin with gold and shadow. He turned as she approached, sweat gleaming on his brow, eyes wild but clear. In his posture, there was no submission, no supplication, only the presence of a force newly awakened. Lysara slowed, awe etched into every line of her face. "The analysts underestimated your kind," she breathed, voice reverent and shaken. Marcus's expression was grim, his voice stripped raw. "You wanted to see what would break me. I suppose he found it." Her eyes flickered from the battered loyalist to Marcus's trembling hands. The knowledge of what she had set in motion, by curiosity, by hubris, by something far more intimate, settled between them like a live wire. She stepped closer, the predatory arrogance of a conqueror replaced by the wary regard of an equal. For a moment, neither spoke. The air quivered with the aftermath of violence, the fragile beauty of the verdancy marred by the presence of blood and broken bodies. Lysara studied Marcus with new understanding. He was no longer a trophy, no longer a symbol of defiance to display behind glass. He was a mystery and a threat. Something she could not control, but could no longer ignore. She glanced at Sarek, broken and moaning at her feet, and then back to Marcus. "This cannot continue," she said quietly. "Not as it was." Marcus nodded, the tension in his frame easing, just barely. "So what now?" Lysara's eyes, usually so cold and calculating, softened. We decide together. Our fate, yours, mine, this ship, will not be dictated by those who fear change, or by those who would destroy what they do not understand. She extended her hand, palm up. The offer was simple, but it carried the weight of all that had passed. A challenge, a proposal, a truce. Marcus hesitated, then placed his hand in hers. The contact was electric, a promise and a warning. Around them, the Verdancy's artificial dawn brightened, as if acknowledging the shift in power and purpose. For the first time since his capture, Marcus felt the boundaries of his prison dissolve, not by force, but by choice. And for Lysara, the experiment became an alliance, dangerous and uncertain. Together, they stood amid the ruins of Sarek's rebellion, the first steps of a future neither could yet imagine. Sarek's death ignited unrest. The news spread through the starship like a crackle of plasma through a ruptured conduit, first in hushed voices along the officers' promenade, then in open accusation on the command decks. Sarek's broken body, carried out beneath a shroud, became the rallying cry of Lysara's rivals. In shadowed alcoves, ambitious lieutenants and rival houses whispered of weakness, of a sovereign who placed trust in a human, an enemy, above her own. The empire, vast and fractious, trembled on the knife edge of rebellion. Lysara felt the shift. It pulsed through the ship's walls, a low tremor of insurrection. Her own advisors watched her with careful eyes, weighing loyalty against the changing winds. The corridors that once parted for her passage now bristled with wary salutes, half-bowed and uncertain. The memory of Sarek's defiance, his final futile strike, burned in the mind of every officer with a taste for power. She withdrew from the bridge, Marcus at her side. Together they retreated into her sanctum, a chamber of obsidian and emerald, hidden deep in the starship's core. There, beneath the hush of layered force fields and a sky simulated in violet and gold, they waited as the Empire threatened to fracture. Time stretched, taut as a drawn wire. Lysara held court only with Marcus, dismissing the petitions and warnings that flooded her comms. He spent his days exploring the sanctum's strange tranquility: silver-leaf trees, a garden pool rimmed with luminous stone, the hush of ancient wind chimes tuned to alien scales. She watched him from the balcony, studying how his presence unsettled even the silence. By the third day, unrest had blossomed into something deadly. Loyalists came bearing messages from the outer decks, threats, challenges, promises of open revolt. The Council, supreme arbiters of the Empire's will, summoned Lysara to stand judgment for Sarek's death and for her unorthodox bond with the Terran. The old guard scented blood in the water. On that third morning, Lysara found Marcus by the pool. He sat on the smooth rim, one hand trailing in the clear, unnaturally still water. His reflection was uncertain, a man between worlds, uncertain of his place in either. He sensed her approach before she spoke, but did not turn. She did not waste words. The Council has called a vote. They'll use Sarek's death, and my connection to you, as cause. Marcus's fingers stilled in the water. He looked up at her, eyes shadowed by the knowledge of what came next. "You want me gone?" he asked, the words flat but edged with something deeper. Disappointment, maybe, or relief. Lysara moved closer, the light catching on the silver filigree at her throat. "No," she said, voice steady. "I want you as my champion. Stand with me, and I'll grant Earth protection under the Empire." He studied her for a long moment. The sound of water rippling against stone filled the pause between them. "Champion," he echoed, uncertain. "Not a prisoner, not a symbol, but an ally?" She nodded, her golden eyes unguarded for the first time. "They call you dangerous because you are unpredictable. The Council fears chaos. I would rather rule beside chaos than languish in certainty." Marcus's jaw tightened, considering. "And Earth? You'd protect my people?" "My word," Lysara replied, her hand extended. The Empire's armada will not touch your world. Stand with me, Marcus. Not as a captive, as a force. He hesitated, searching her face for deceit. Instead, he found only resolve, and something like hope, raw and unpolished. Lysara's hand hovered, the gesture neither command nor plea, but invitation. She leaned closer, her voice intense, urgent. You are the only unpredictable force I've met in centuries. I have ruled unchallenged, but I have not lived, not truly. Rule beside me, and we reshape everything. Marcus exhaled, a breath years in the making. You realize what this means. If we lose, we do not intend to lose, she replied, fierce as a star's birth. He reached out, his hand closing around hers. The contact was electric, a jolt that echoed through the sanctum, through the ship itself. In that moment, the roles of captor and captive fell away. What remained was alliance, born of necessity and sharpened by respect. She squeezed his hand, eyes bright with a challenge that was also a promise. Then let them come. Around them, the air shimmered with new purpose. The empire outside might rage and threaten, but in the sanctum, a new power had been forged. Not sovereign and prisoner, but partners, willing to face the storm as one. Their alliance was sealed, unspoken oaths burning hotter than any engine. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Chaos and certainty, Terran and sovereign, standing side by side at the edge of an empire on the brink. The council chamber became a battlefield. Rows of obsidian pillars rose like the spines of some ancient beast, encircling the vast arena at the starship's core. Above, banners of every house and clan shimmered with bioluminescent sigils, emblems of a legacy now trembling on the edge of chaos. Representatives filled the balconies, their voices a low storm, anticipation thick in the air. The doors at the chamber's head thundered open. Lysara strode in, armored for ceremony and war alike. Her emerald cuirass caught the torchlight, casting shifting gold across her face. Crimson hair coiled in elaborate braids, and on her brow gleamed the black jade circlet of her sovereignty. At her side walked Marcus, every inch transformed. Imperial regalia draped over his frame, the deep blue and silver of the Empire tailored to Terran lines. His eyes, calm but unyielding, met the assembly's scrutiny without flinching. A silence fell, then the chamber erupted. Accusations and outrage soared like daggers. Outrage! Treason! He is a Terran, a weapon, a threat. The voice that cut through the noise belonged to Lord Venn, whose scarlet robes and predatory bearing marked him as the most ambitious of Lysara's rivals. Venn rose, slamming his staff for order. Sovereign, you defile this chamber with the presence of an enemy. We demand explanation before this farce continues. Lysara held her ground, every inch the ruler. Her gaze swept the assembly, cold, regal, unflinching. When she spoke, her voice carried to the highest balcony. He is my champion, she declared. He exposed a traitor and will defend the throne. Venn sneered, gesturing to his retinue. You bring an animal to guard your crown? If you cannot defend it with the blood of our houses, you do not deserve it. A signal passed, subtle as a pulse, deadly as a knife. Venn's guards surged forward, blades flashing, plasma rifles humming to life. The assembly recoiled, some clamoring for order, others for blood. Marcus stepped in front of Lysara, instincts roaring to life. Time seemed to slow. The first guard lunged. Marcus moved, faster than humanly possible, his hand closing around the blade, wrenching it aside. He spun, driving his elbow into the attacker's jaw. A second rushed in. Marcus ducked, sweeping the legs and sending the man crashing to the floor. At his side, Lysara moved with calculated grace, her ceremonial staff snapping open to reveal a shimmering energy blade. She parried a strike, twisted, and disabled her opponent with a precise blow to the solar plexus. Left flank, she called. Marcus reacted instantly, catching a third attacker mid-leap and hurling him across the marble floor. The council chamber became chaos, Ven's loyalists pouring in but meeting a wall of resistance. Marcus's speed and strength defied logic, his every movement an echo of the trials that had nearly broken him. Lysara matched him, her strategy and force honed by centuries of war. They fought as one. She called targets, he neutralized them. He shielded her from plasma fire, she exploited every distraction. A pair of guards flanked Lysara. Marcus intercepted, disarming one, pivoting to block a blade aimed at her back. Their synergy was flawless, every gesture born of trust and desperation. Ven's voice rose above the carnage, furious and desperate. "Seize them both, for the future of the Empire!" But the tide was already turning. The Council's neutral guards, seeing the coup for what it was, joined the defense. Marcus spun, catching Ven's chief enforcer by the throat and hurling him across the dais. Lysara dispatched another challenger, her blade flashing in a dance of emerald and crimson. One by one, Ven's loyalists fell. Some groaned, clutching shattered limbs, others fled, tossing weapons aside. Ven himself, face twisted in disbelief, stumbled back as Marcus advanced. Lysara leveled her blade at the Lord's chest. "It is over," she said, voice ringing like a bell. Ven's staff clattered to the floor. The chamber fell silent. Around them, the banners of Empire shimmered, the air sharp with the scent of ozone and fear. The counselors stared down at the victors, the old order shattered. In that hush, Lysara lowered her weapon, breath coming in shallow bursts. Marcus's uniform was torn, his knuckles bloodied, but his eyes met hers, alive with the fire of survival and something more. For a heartbeat, they stood apart, tension crackling. The veneer of ceremony vanished, leaving only what the crucible of battle had forged. Lysara's weapon slipped from her hand, clattering against the marble. She crossed the blood-spattered floor in 3 swift strides, seized Marcus by the collar, and drew him into a kiss, fierce, desperate, victorious. He pulled her close, hands trembling with adrenaline and relief. Her lips tasted of salt and metal, of hope wrested from the jaws of ruin. In that moment, the battle and the Empire faded, eclipsed by the pulse of their union. The assembly watched, stunned, as sovereign and champions sealed their alliance, not with words, but with passion kindled in fire and danger. Around them, the Empire's fate hung in the balance, but for Lysara and Marcus, the future began here, bloodied, breathless, and unbreakably together. The failed coup was met with swift retribution. In the days that followed the battle in the council chamber, the Dominion trembled beneath the will of its sovereign. Lysara wasted no time. The ringleaders were tried and exiled, their titles stripped and banners burned in the glare of the starship's central atrium. Ambitious houses that had wavered in their loyalty saw their privileges revoked, their leaders paraded before the court in shame. It was Marcus, standing at Lysara's side in the halls and corridors, who became the living symbol of this new order, a Terran, once captive, now the enforcer of the sovereign's justice. He moved through the starship with a presence that could not be denied. Where Marcus appeared, resistance faltered. The memory of his superhuman speed and the ferocity with which he had defended Lysara became legend overnight. Officers who had doubted now bowed in wary respect. The Dominion bent, first in fear and then in grudging awe, to the rule of its sovereign and her chosen consort. Restoring order was not a matter of spectacle, but of relentless action. Lysara and Marcus held court over tribunals, called the ambitious and the uncertain to account, and reminded the houses, by word and deed, that the age of unrest had ended. In every verdict, every public address, they stood together. The sight of them, Lysara, regal and unbreakable, and Marcus, the Terran with the eyes of a storm, became the emblem of a new era. Now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. The throne room shimmered with 1,000 emerald and gold lights, refracted from the dark crystal throne at its heart. The great court assembled, nobles in their finest regalia arrayed beneath banners that seemed to tremble in the charged air. Lysara sat on her crystal seat, posture straight as a blade, her armor gleaming in the glow. Marcus stood beside her, his presence both challenge and promise, the weight of his new station written in every measured movement. Silence fell as Lysara rose, her voice echoing across the marble expanse. The age of unrest is over. The house of Ven is dissolved. Its line shall trouble the empire no longer. She paused, letting the words settle like the closing of a tomb. I present Marcus of Terra, not as a guard, nor as a champion, but as my consort. His word is my word. His world is under imperial protection. Gasps rippled through the court. Faces shifted from shock to calculation, to disbelief and back again. For centuries, the order of succession and alliance had been written in blood and tradition, but with a few words, Lysara had rewritten the future. One noble dared to step forward, bowing low. Sovereign, the law. The law, Lysara replied, her gaze unblinking, is what I say it is. This is the new order. Those who cannot accept it may step aside. A murmur of acceptance, cautious, wary, but laced with awe, rose from the assembly. The threat of rebellion faded like a shadow at dawn. Even the most conservative among them sensed that the old world had slipped away, replaced by something impossible. An empire guided by the hand of the unpredictable, where tradition bowed to passion and possibility. The ceremony ended with the thunder of loyalists' applause. As the court dispersed, the gossip began anew, but now it was laced with admiration, even envy. Lysara and Marcus had not only survived, they had claimed the future. Later, as twilight fell beyond the great viewing portals, Lysara stood alone on her private balcony. The city lights of the Dominion's capital world sparkled far below, and the void above was crowded with stars. She leaned against the cool rail, her thoughts far away, across the empire, across time. Marcus joined her in silence, hands tucked into the sleeves of his imperial tunic. He studied the constellations, then glanced at her with a crooked, teasing smile. Consort? That's a lot to take in, he said softly. She laughed, the sound low and unguarded. I think it suits you. You wear disruption better than any crown. He leaned on the railing beside her, their shoulders brushing. I'm not sure the court will ever get used to this. They'll have to, she replied, threading her fingers through his. They fear what they cannot predict. But you, Marcus, you are the future I choose, not the fate I inherit. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw not the sovereign, but the woman who had risked everything for change. If we're rewriting the rules, maybe I should warn you. Terran consorts have a stubborn streak. She smiled, golden eyes alight. Good. I would rather face the unknown with someone who dares defy it. They stood together, hands entwined, gazing into the endless tapestry of stars. Behind them, the Dominion hummed with the promise of transformation and the faint, ever-present threat of those unwilling to accept it. Ahead, the galaxy spread wide, peril and possibility in every direction. The future was uncertain, but for Lysara and Marcus, uncertainty was no longer something to fear. Their reign began in that moment, passionate, unpredictable, united, sovereign and consort, alien and Terran, standing together at the threshold of destiny, forever altering the fate of an empire. This brings our story to a close. Don't forget to hit subscribe, give the video a like, and share in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. Our team will truly appreciate your support. There are plenty more exciting stories waiting for you on our channel. See you in the next video.